This conference
So,
will now be recorded.
okay, everybody. So, the topic today is from this week's parsha, from this week's Torah reading, Mishpatim, which goes through all the different, not all, but 53 different halachot, more of the mundane laws. And one of them is one that is often misunderstood, very often, even more often, it's misrepresented. And that is when the Torah says, ayin tachat ayin, an eye for an eye. And as we like to prove, and I thank Rabbi Giel's student for providing most of the Mara Makomot, most of the sources that we'll be using. So the Torah, it will become very clear, never meant literally an eye for an eye. When people talk about that bloody, cruel, biblical justice, and they love to quote an eye for an eye, that was never the case of our understanding of the Torah. That's not what the Torah is means. That's not what the Torah is even saying. And Christianity, they quote that in old times they said an eye for an eye, but we say turn the other cheek. Yeah, right. As if Christianity's treatment of others and Judaism, recently it's been far better, but historically has not been turn the other cheek. It's been beat both cheeks. So it's been grossly misinterpreted and misrepresented, and I would even dare say slandered in many situations. So let us investigate. Let's go through these different understandings. Let's see the actual verses. Let's see the context. Hello, Cheryl. Let's see the language when it's used elsewhere. And then let's use our Torah logic, which of course logic, kal v'chomer, is one of the ways of interpreting and understanding the Torah. And we'll show clearly that it's not that the rabbis decided to change it because it was a little bit too tough, a little bit too rough, but we'll show that the way the rabbis understand it, which is that a person must pay the value of the damage done to the other person in place of whatever was done. If you damage that person's eye, then you must pay the value of that in place of what you did. Shein tachas shein, the tooth for a tooth, yad tachas yad. It does not mean that your hand, your foot, your tooth, your eye, but it always meant an eye's worth for an eye. Of course, once we finish everything, the last point will be, so if it clearly means, based on context and based on translation and language and logic, if it clearly means that you pay the value, so why did the Torah present it in such a way that it seems to be saying literally an eye for an eye? And certainly we will deal with that. Let's first deal with the context, okay? And that on our source sheet, Roman numeral 1, where it says context over there, it is Shmot, Exodus 21, 18 to 25, and that is, again, that is in this week's Parsha, this week's Torah reading. Verse 18, if men quarrel, and one strikes the other with a stone or with a fist, so that is intentional battery, right? You knock the daylights out of another person. You intentionally bodily damaged that person. And he does not die. If the person dies, that's murder. That then moves over into a capital case. And in a capital case, there is no payment. The person will not get two different punishments. If a person is receiving capital punishment, he doesn't also have to pay. That's the Torah law. So again, verse 18 at the very top, hello Warren, welcome, welcome. If men quarrel, ki yirvun anashim, and one smites the other, strikes the other, be'evan with the stone, or be'egrov with the fist, v'lo yamut, the person did not die. It's not a capital case. V'nafalu mishkav, but he fell to bed. He's confined to his bed. So this person was really, really harmed. Verse 19, if he gets up and walks about outside on his support, the assailant shall be clear. If the person will get up, and we have a similar law here in the United States. Hello, Steve. And that is in a certain situation when the person's confined to the hospital because of whatever damage was done to him. So we wait and see. If he survives this, it's not a capital case. If he does not survive it, then it is a case of murder. So if he gets up and walks about outside, Amashanto, Vinika Makeh, then the one who struck him will be cleared from any murder charges. However, Rak Shivto Yitain, he must give Shivto, that is payment for his shevet, for his having to, for his work, we call this Workmans Compensation. He had to stay at home. He was unable to go to work. This is talking about when people used to actually get up and go to work and not stay home and work. Seems like a long time ago that we were living in such a world, right? But he can't go to work, so you have to pay him his Workman's Compensation. V'rapo yirapeh, and you also must pay his doctor's bills, the medical expenses that were incurred as a result. Hello, Lily, nice to see you. The medical expenses that were incurred as a result of this beating that this person gave, the beater must compensate for that, must pay for that. So when someone beats someone else intentionally, black and white, crystal clear, you beat someone else intentionally, what happens to you? Payment. Okay, 20 and 21 deal with damage to a slave. Let's continue to 22. If two men are fighting and they're fighting with each other, but in the course of their fighting with one another, the nakfu isha hara, they hit a pregnant woman. V'yatzu yeladeha, and she miscarried as a result of this. Was this intentional or not intentional? Striking this pregnant woman. This is now not intentional. So we moved from intentional damage. You went to beat this guy with your fist or with your stones, or with stones, and the repercussion, the result of that, the penalty for that is monetary payment. Now we're dealing not with intentional damage caused, but we're dealing with accidental damage that was caused. Two guys are fighting, and one, whatever the course of the fight, they ended up knocking into, hitting, hurting a pregnant woman, and she miscarried as a result of it. V'lo yason, but she was not killed. Now, just as an aside, when we had our Lunch and Learn on the Jewish view of abortion, we see from here that murdering the baby, the fetus, is not considered murder. She miscarried, but she's still alive. Oh, then lo yason. There was not a fatality. This is not going to become a capital case. There will not be murder charges. So therefore, what will follow? Kasher yashis alav bal ha'isha, according to the claims, the monetary claims that the woman's husband will make. V'natan biflilim. That will be given according to the plilim, according to the judges. Yes, Cheryl.
So it doesn't matter how far along in pregnancy the woman was? I mean, supposing the baby was
I'm
on.
not, wait. I hear what you're saying, Cheryl. I'm not condoning abortion. I'm not condoning abortion late term. I'm not condoning abortion early term. What I am saying is from here we do see that a person is not considered to be a person who is alive, and taking that life would be considered murder until the person is born. Right? Abortion is a very, very complicated, and from a Jewish perspective, there are times when abortion would be permitted. We had a whole lunch and learn that I don't want to get too sidetracked. But we clearly see from here is if the woman dies, it's considered a capital case. If she miscarried as a result of this, it's not considered a capital case. So if she dies, it's murder. If she miscarries, it's not murder. That's all I'm pointing out from here.
Okay. So it isn't an abortion. It is an abortion if she miscarries. But it's not
abortion. I'm sorry. It's abortion like. What do you mean it's an abortion if she miscarries?
Well, that's what it's sounding like from what you're saying.
What I'm saying is they ended up taking the life of the fetus. In this situation, they inadvertently caused the death of a fetus, and we don't judge that as a capital case. That's all I'm extracting from here at this point. As an aside, we can talk about it afterwards if you like. I don't want to spend more time on that.
Okay.
Okay. V'im ason yiyeh. 23. But if there is a fatality meaning that besides what we discussed in 22, that there was a miscarriage, that she lost her life, then it will be a capital case, a life for a life. And then actually the rabbis debate, if I meant to hit this person and instead it went to that person, that person dies, is that actually a capital case or not? But that's not the point here. Let's go further. So when we are discussing now this accidental damage that was caused to this woman, the Torah says an eye for an eye. Our pasuk, ayin tachat ayin, an eye for an eye. Shein tachat shein, a tooth for a tooth. Yad tachat yad, a hand for a hand. Regel tachat regel, a foot for a foot. Kaviyah tachat kaviyah, a burn for a burn. Petza tachat patza, a wound for a wound. Chabura tachat chabura, a bruise for a bruise. And the Gemara learns out why we needed to have each of these different categories that were mentioned. But what is clear from the context, if we just saw in verse 18 and verse 19 that when one person deliberately beats another person, causes them bodily injury, what is the penalty? Payment. Can it possibly mean 3 verses later that when accidental damage is caused, now it's not going to be payment? What is it going to be? Now we're going to take out this guy's eye. We're going to knock out his tooth. We'll cut off his hand as they do in Saudi Arabia. We'll cut off his leg. Can it possibly mean that when we look at the context, if for deliberate damage, it is not bodily harm done to the perpetrator, but it is a monetary payment, then of course when it comes to accidental damage, of course the Torah, when it says ayin tachat ayin, it means the value of an eye should be paid for that eye. It cannot possibly be saying that for deliberate beating administered, nothing happens to you. You deliberately knock out that guy's eye, you have to pay damages. But accidentally, you're going to lose your eye. Clearly, that cannot be what the Torah is saying. And this is something that happens often. Yes, Alan, 1 second. This is something that happens often, right? Certainly when it comes to the missionaries, that they'll take something out of context and say, this is what it says. They say Isaiah 53:2. And you say, yeah, but what does it say in 53:1? Oh, I have no idea. What does it say in 53:3? I don't know. Yes, Alan.
So where does it say that when you do it intentionally, it's a monetary payment?
Verse 18. I think you signed in a little bit late. If men quarrel, verse 18, the top there. Right? Literally 4 verses before. He hit him. Be'evan, he picked up a stone and he smacked him. Be'egrov, with his fists. V'lo yamut, the guy didn't die. If he dies right away, capital case, murder, different. Nafal mishkaf, he didn't die immediately, but now he's bedridden. Oh, we have to wait and see. Verse 19. Will he recover from this beating? If he dies 2 days later, we have ourselves a capital case. But if he gets up, he will be cleansed. It's not a capital case. What does he have to do? Rak shivto yitain v'rapo yirapeh. But he needs to pay monetarily. He needs to pay for the loss of work. He needs to pay for the loss for the doctor's bills. And elsewhere, the Torah speaks about actually we'll conclude today that there are 5 monetary payments that a person we must assess. And if all 5 or some of those 5 apply, then you have to pay whatever those amounts are. Nezek, the actual damage. Tsar, the pain. Right? That's when we mentioned burn for a burn. There might not be any real damage, but there was pain. You have to pay nezek, tsar, ripoy, the doctor's bills, shevet, workman's compensation, boshet, and the humiliation. So right there in verse 18 and 19, talking about deliberate damage, what is the repercussion? Payment. And now all of a sudden over here, when it is accidental, can it possibly mean bodily maiming is going to be done to the person? Okay, and I summarized it a little bit over there. Right, these verses 18 to 27 are bodily harm inflicted by man on his fellow. 18-19, intentional damage. What results? Monetary payment. 20 to 21, that's the slaves. 22 to 25, accidental damage. So what must the payment be when it is intentional? If it's monetary, then of course when it's accidental, the Torah is saying the value of an eye will be given for an eye. And again, for those who tuned in a little bit later, and of course we'll need to explain, so why doesn't it say that? Why does it say an eye for an eye? We'll come to that. I know you're thinking that, Alan. I know my customers. Okay. Now, you might have noticed that I made on verse 19 in the Hebrew, I made bold one of the words. It says, Rak shivto yitain. His workman's compensation, his enforced idleness, he must give, yitain. And of course, yitain means payment. Let's see the second place in the Torah where we have again ayin tachas ayin. And that is v'ish, and a man. This is Vayikra, Leviticus 24, 17 to 20, towards the bottom of that first page of the notes that I shared. V'ish ki yakeh kol nefesh adam. If a person strikes down the soul of a person, kills a person, mot yumat. For that there is capital punishment. Umake nefesh behema. If one slays an animal, yishalmena, then there is payment to the owner of that animal. Nefesh tachat nafesh. Interesting. It uses the term there, nefesh tachat nafesh, a soul for a soul. Now, clearly, you're paying. You're not giving up your life for killing an animal. So when it says nefesh tachat nafesh, what does it mean? It means the value of that soul, of that animal that you killed, must be given in place of that animal that is no longer with us. That's very clear over there. Do we agree on that? When it says over there, Maka nefesh behema, you killed an animal, what happens? Yishalmena, you have to pay. Shalem is payment. Nefesh tachat nafesh. There doesn't mean you're giving up your life. We just said you have to pay. But it means the value of that life must be given to the owner of that animal in place of that life that you took. Let's continue now in Vayikra. So we've already set the stage that tachat X is not that you're giving up your life for its life, it's the value. And now we continue, verse 19, which is the top now of the second page that I shared. The ish ki yitain mum ba'amito, if a person gives a blemish to his friend, injury to his friend, kasher asa kenye asa lo, as he has done, so should be done to him. And now we explain. Shever tachat shever, ayin tachat ayin, shein tachat shein. Kasher yitain mum ba'adam, kain yinatain bo. Now we just saw that nefesh tachat nefesh did not mean his life, because that very pasuk said he has to pay when he took the life of an animal. So over here, when it says what should be done to him, it's clearly in the same context of verse 20. 19 and 20 is clearly in the same context as verse 18. And here we add that it means the value of the fracture for the fracture, the value of the eye for the eye, the value of the tooth for the tooth, the value of the injury for the injury. Kain yinatain bo. Once again, that's bold lettered. Yinatain. Yinatain. What does it mean? Latate? Natan? What does it mean, linatain, my friends? To give. To give. Now, if my eye is getting knocked out, I'm not giving him anything. My eye, this is well before there were any of these organ donations. He's not getting my eye. I'm not giving him anything. Yinatain, as we saw back on the first page, by Rak Shivto Yitain, verse 19, he's got to pay. Yitain means to give payment. So from the context, it is painfully clear, painfully evident, pun intended, it is painfully evident that we're not talking about knocking out his eye or his tooth or chopping off his hand or his foot. Let's go now to the language. Tachat. Tachat, we've been translating an eye for an eye. What does tachat literally mean? Under, beneath, or in place of. Let's see some examples of that. The one that I brought on the page, on Roman numeral 2, language, is Bereshis, Genesis 44:33. To get us up to speed with what's happening over here, to get the context, I don't want to be accused of not giving the context. right? That would be somewhat hypocritical, right? So what happened is the brothers have come back the second time to Joseph in Egypt in order to get food, provisions to bring back to their father, to bring back home. They, of course, do not know that the person, this viceroy of Egypt, is their long lost or long sold brother, Joseph. And they came back with Binyamin, as Yosef had insisted. They're on their way home. They seem to have dodged the bullet. All of a sudden, they hear camel hooves in the distance, and Yosef's men have caught up with them. Why have you done bad? Why have you repaid bad for good? Why did you steal the goblet? We didn't steal the goblet, right? If anyone stole the goblet, we'll all be your slaves. No, whoever stole the goblet will be the slave. And of course, the goblet had been planted by Binyamin, and there it was discovered. And what Yosef was doing was making sure Binyamin was going to be safe. Right, we have a whole discussion that's online about that when we had the Parsha class on that. So now they come back, and Yehuda, the one who had guaranteed Binyamin's safe return, is now arguing with Yosef, advocating, and he says, "Vata," and now after supplicating and about it'll kill my father if Binyamin comes. If we go back and Binyamin's not with us, our father will die. And therefore, Vata, now, Yeshiv na avdecha, let your servant, let me, Yehuda speaking, let I, your servant, he says to Yosef, I will remain, Yeshiv, I will remain here, tachat hana'ar. Tachat, that same word, tachat hana'ar, in the place of. You're about to lose something. Let me fill that which you are about to lose. If you accede to my request to release Binyamin, you will be losing the slave that you should have because he stole your goblet. Let me be there, tachat, in his place, so that you shall not lose. Tachat, we see elsewhere in the Torah. It's not the typical word for payment, granted. It's not the typical word for death, for injury. Tachat is to replace. Now, if this guy gets his eye knocked out, it's not replacing anything. But if the value of the eye will be given to the person, then that is tachat. That is in place of. Let's go to a third point. It says in Devarim, continuing on our source sheet, it says in Devarim, no, it's in Bamidbar. One second. It can't be Devarim and Numbers. That cannot be. My mistake. It says in Bamidbar, Numbers. $35. Let's hear. V'lo tikchu kofer lenefesh rotzeach. If a person killed someone else, that's a capital case. You cannot accept kofer, a payment. No matter how wealthy that person is who committed this murder, he can't pay. He can't buy his way out of it. Asher hu rasha lamut. He murdered someone else. He can't pay his way out of it. He has done something for which he is a rasha, has done such an evil act for which there is a death penalty. Kimot yumat. he must be put to death. There cannot be a monetary payment for intentional murder. Let's work our way down. 32. V'lo tichu kofer lanus el ir miklato. Lashuv lashevet ba'aretz ad mot hakohen. The city of refuge. Who goes to the city of refuge? If the person inadvertently killed someone else, then that person, there's not capital case, that's not murder, that's manslaughter. What the person must do is go to the city of refuge. There were certain designated cities as cities of refuge, and there he must live. Lashuv lashevet ba'aretz, to live there in the land of the living, ad mot hakohen, until the death of the Kohen. Upon the death of the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, then this person could return back home. So 31 tells us you can't accept a monetary payment for a murderer, one who killed intentionally. 32 is telling me, and you can't accept a monetary payment. Let's go down one level now, from the intentional murder to the inadvertent killing, slaying. I might think there I can accept payment. No, you can't accept payment for that. The person must go to the city of refuge and must remain there until the death of the Kohen. Now, if for damage done to a person, it's not payment, but we're going to knock out his eye, then how could I have ever imagined that we could accept payment for an inadvertent killing or for a murder? If when a person damages someone else, we're taking out his eye, and it's not going to be payment, it's going to be his eye comes out, then of course, when it's a murder case, whether it's accidental killing or intentional murder, of course there is no payment. These verses only make sense if that which is less than killing, that which caused less than death, there it is payment. But once death is involved, no payment. Not for an intentional murder, not even for an inadvertent killing. But this only makes sense if, when it comes to damage, there the penalty is payment. So payment is on the table. Now we can discuss, was it maybe it's on the table for an inadvertent killing, or for intentional killing, murder, killing, etc. One last point. In Vayikra 24:22, it says, Mishpat echad yeh lachem. There must be equal judgment, equal justice for all cases. For the convert, for the ezrach, for the resident, yiyeh. This the Gemara discusses. It's got to be an equal, consistent penalty. So let's say a person knocks out the eye. Let's say a blind man knocks out the other guy's eye. So we're going to take out his eye? Is that equal to taking out the eye of a seeing person? Let's say the person that he knocked out his eye he legally blind. He could see some things but couldn't see much. And this guy is Hawkeye. Is that going to be the same when we knock out his eye? Now, you don't want to do more than knocking out his eye. That's all he did. In the time of the Torah, where medicine was where it was at then, You knock out someone's eye, you cut off their hand, their leg. Chances are the person's going to die. There's an excellent chance that complications will set in, infections will set in. But the Torah says it's got to be equal, proper, similar, consistent penalties. What is consistent penalty? The damage that you caused is the amount that you must give. That is mishpat echad. That is consistent penalties. It is perfectly the same and consistent in every case. We assess the damage that was caused. I will soon see the Mishnah. There are 5 ways there are 5 aspects that get taken into account. Each one is measured specifically for that particular occurrence, and that is the exact amount that the person must pay. Yes, Alan.
So exactly how you consistently put a value on an eye?
Oh, how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean,
So,
how do you have a consistent value on somebody's eye?
what's consistent is for each person, the value will be according to what that is, right? And the eye, right? So when it comes to
what's the value of my eye?
Okay, so you're making an excellent point. Meaning, if we're going to, and the Gemara goes through this, if we were going to ask a person, how much are you willing to pay to keep your eyesight? It would be probably almost what we have, right? These things are worth millions of dollars to us. Not that we might have millions of dollars, but that's what it's worth to us. So the Gemara works through the way to assess it is if this person was being sold, and we'll see this in later Mishnah, if this person is being sold on the market as a slave, how much would he have gotten before? How much will he get now? That is the decrease in value that the person has caused. And then, of course, there's also all the other 4. We'll come to the Mishnah over there. That is how we're going to determine that. And that's going to be exactly, meaning if the person was legally blind and now he's completely blind, there's not going to be that much of a difference, right? If this person was, right, and then we're going to take into account all the other things, right, that as a result of this person was a diamond cutter, right? Now the person can't be doing that, right? This person was an NBA basketball star, and now you've broken his leg, right? All these things are taken into account. But it's consistent. It's not consistent. I'm not saying it's consistent that every person's eye is worth the same. It's consistent that in every case, the damage that was caused is what must be compensated. That is what must be compensated.
And if you don't have enough money for the worth of my eye,
so then you owe that, well, your property, right? If everything, right? So then that person forever owes that money. Whatever that person earns will go towards the tally of what they owe. If you're thinking about being sold as a slave, that's a very specific situation where a person stole and cannot pay it back. But that's the amount of money that they owe, right? How will it be collected? That will again depend on situations. 2 more points that I wanted to make. One is, if you look towards the bottom of the next of page 2, this is the eyes of a Vilna Gaon. This is what he sees, and he says an amazing thing. he says that all of this that we've shown from the context and from the usage elsewhere and from logic, and that the Torah should not be contradicting itself in one place where it says consistent justice, and that this should not contradict what it says elsewhere. He says hidden in those words is the fact that it's monetary payment. And he says, ayin, the verse says, ayin tachat ayin. Literally means ayin, an eye, tachat, beneath ayin. So he says, well, let's see what is tachat. Let's see which letters are beneath ayin. Interesting. In the Hebrew alphabet, aleph bet, after ayin, what letter is beneath ayin? What letter comes after ayin? The letter pei. What letter is beneath the yud, the second letter? That is the letter chaf. What letter is beneath the third letter, the nun? That is samach. Pei, chaf, samach. Unscramble those letters. You have chaf, samach, fei. What does that spell? Alan, what does that spell? Kesef. So what's literally under the ayin is the word kesef. That's what, so the Vilna Gaon says, actually hinted in this pasuk is that, of course, it means kesef. It means money. It means payment. So then the $64 million question is, so why didn't the Torah say that? Why didn't the Torah say you knock out someone's eye, what do? Pay for it. So had the Torah done that, I wouldn't have had a topic for today's Lunch and Learn. No, that's not the answer. Right? So Rav Kook explains very, very beautifully as follows. Had the Torah said that, so, okay, if I knock out someone's eye, I'll pay for it. And then I'm good to go. I'm finished. I took care of what I needed to take care of. Let's say I really don't like this guy. I really want to stick it to him. I've got a flush bank account. All the payments are not going to make a dent. So, hey, it's almost giving license for me to inflict bodily harm on someone else, and I pay for it, and I'm good to go. All is good. Life is good. So the Torah is telling us, ayin tachat ayin. What you have done is so severe, so serious, that really you should have lost your own eye. You obviously didn't stop to think, what would it be like for me to be in the situation that I have put that person into? And the Torah is telling you, think about that. Ayin tachat ayin. What you have done is so horrific that you should be losing your own eye. But nothing's going to be gained by that. That person's not going to gain anything by that. But understand, recognize, internalize the severity of what you have done, and realize that with the payment, you're not finished. You're not finished with that payment. You need to get this person's forgiveness. You need to work with this person to get him to forgive you. You've got to recognize what you've done and do everything in your power to, you can't correct it, but to do anything and everything that can be done to make it as good as it possibly can be after this travesty of what you have done. Therefore, don't think, no big deal. Oh, it's going to cost me $100. No problem. I'll knock out 2. No, you cannot be flippant about this. Ayin tachat ayin. That's how seriously this is viewed by the heavens. And therefore, make sure, you don't do it. And if you do it, make sure that you make it as, besides what you're obligated to do, all those payments, make sure that you make it as right as it can be made. That is how Rav Kook explained that. Actually, let me read that. He said it better than me, so why should I? Let me get how he said it. Sorry, 1 second. He gives a parable. A child does something wrong, right? So the mom and dad are a tag team. Okay? A child committed a grave offense. The father raises his hand to punish the son. But the mother says, no, don't do that. Right? That's the tag team drama. Right? Well, if the father's not going to hit the kid, why make a whole show of it? So no, this scene provided an important educational lesson for this errant son. Even though he was only lightly disciplined, the son was made to understand that his actions deserved a much more severe punishment. So too over here, the offender needs to understand the gravity of his actions. In practice, he only pays monetary restitution, but he should not think that with money alone he can repair the damage he inflicted. Maimonides explains that Torah's intention is not that the court should actually injure him in the same way he injured his neighbor, but rather it is fitting to do that to him. And then he fully develops this further. Causing bodily injury is not like causing monetary loss. One who causes monetary loss is exonerated as soon as he repays the damages. You cause monetary loss, you pay the person back, end of story. But if one injures his neighbor, even though he paid all 5 categories of monetary restitution, even if he offered to guard all the rams of Navayot or sacrifices, he is not exonerated until he has asked the injured party for forgiveness and he agrees to forgive him. So the Torah wrote it in such a manner that we should appreciate the seriousness and not think, it's a monetary thing. I paid, right? I'm not going to take the guy's calls anymore. Why should I take the guy's calls? I paid, finished. No, it's not finished. This is very, very serious stuff. So we've seen from the context, we've seen from the usage of the word, we've seen from the other places where the Torah tells us that there needs to be complete justice, consistent justice. The Torah never meant an eye for an eye. The Torah meant the value of an eye should be given for an eye, and realize and appreciate just how serious this is, and don't get yourself into that predicament. Okay, my friends, we will call it over here. Let me wish everybody a good day and Shabbat Shalom. Look forward to seeing those who can join us tomorrow night, where we are 5 o'clock, Mincha Kabbalat Shabbat. Look forward to seeing all of those who can join us. Okay. Good seeing you, Steve. Thanks for all those who lit up their cameras. Makes it a little bit easier. Those whose cameras are working, Roger, I know, makes it easier to teach. And I've got some, when I make a bad joke and someone smiles, it makes it easier to teach like that. Otherwise you feel like you're talking into a cave. All right, everybody. Hi, Warren. A good day, everybody, and Shabbat Shalom.